Greetings from a coder's journey. This is the next episode of our playlist where we are learning how to implement the CQRS pattern using the MediatR library inside of a web API project implemented using ASP.NET Core with controllers. So in this episode, we are going to talk about commands that return a value. So basically what we have seen so far is that queries usually return values and commands do not. So commands are operations that change the state of your application, like updating something, adding something, deleting something. And queries are those operations that do not change the state of the application, like for example, getting an employee by its ID or getting a list of employees, right? But sometimes commands can also return something. I told you in the previous episodes, so think about a command that is responsible for adding one employee or a number of employees to your data store. So if the operation of inserting these employees goes through successfully, what you usually expect is to get the number of inserted rows, right, as a return value. So the number of rows that were inserted or affected. So basically we can implement a command that inserts a bunch of rows and then returns an integer value indicating the number of inserted rows. Maybe, I don't know, we wanted to insert 10 rows, but for whatever reason, only 8 rows were successfully added. So we expect to, for example, get 8 as the returned value of that command. So let's implement this inside of this episode number 9, right? So yeah, this section demonstrates how to create a command that takes a list of employees, adds them to the data store, and returns the number of employees added. First off, as before, we are going to create a command. It is called add employees command, right, with a plural S. So inside of our commands folder, we're going to create a new record, right, called add employees command. And as you can see here, this command as an input parameter, it takes in a list of employees, as you can see here. And what it returns is an integer. So as you can see, it is implementing the iRequest interface coming from MediatR, and it is returning an integer, and it is taking in a list of employees to be added. So this is our command. If I go to my solution here, you can see this add employee command here, right? So a record called add employees command, a list of employees as the input parameter, and an integer as the return value. Now, of course, we need a handler. But before that, we want to implement the method inside of our data store responsible for adding these, commands. So if I do this, you can see the add employees method. So this method takes in that, list, it returns an integer, and then using add range on the employees list, inside of this, data store, it is trying to add these employees to this list, right, using add range. And finally, it is going to return the count of employees, so the total count. We could change this method in a way that the number of inserted rows are returned. But here, because I wanted to, have a simple logic, I am basically returning the number of current rows inside of that, employees list. So if I take a look at my fake data store here, you can see this method, right? So this is the method I was telling you about. It is taking in these, employees. It is adding that employees to the data store, and then it is returning the count of that, employees list that we maintain inside of this class. So the next step is to, of course, have a handler to handle this command. So inside of our handlers, class folder, what we are going to do is that we are going to create this handler it is going to implement this interface. The first type parameter for this generic interface is, of course, the type of the command, and the next parameter is what we will return from this handler, which is an integer. Then again, we have our dependency on our data store, and inside of the handle method, what we are doing is that we are taking in an object of type add employees command, which is the command that this handler is going to handle. We've got our cancellation token, and then using the dependency that we've got of our fake data store, we are calling that add employees method that we just implemented. We are passing in the list of employees, which is a property on that command, which we created as a record, and then this data store and this add employees method is going to take care of adding those employees to the data store and then returning an integer. As you can see here, this handler is going to return a task of integer. So if I go to my project right now, I've got this add employees handler, right? And this is the code that is responsible for adding those employees. So the next step for us would be to add the action method in our controller, which is going to invoke this command and then return the number of inserted rows. So basically what we have done is that we have created this action method in our controller. We have added a name for this input. As you can see here, it is an HTTP post method. We are going to take in a list of employees from the body of this HTTP post request. We are going to create that command, add employees command. We are going to pass in the employees as the input parameter for that command. We are going to call the send method on our mediator, and then we are going to capture the result of this send and of course the handler in this variable called inserted count. And then we are going to return an OK response, and we are going to create an anonymous type called, with one property called inserted rows, which is going to, have the value of this variable inserted rows, right? So this is the way that the way we can implement a command that returns a value. So again, after that, of course, we can go to our HTTP file. We can add like a request that takes in an array of employees, right? And then we can insert those employees into the data store, which is something that I am going to do right now. So now if you take a look here, I have added this post request, which is taking in an array of employees, right, with an ID and a name. I am sending a post request to this endpoint, API employees add multiple. So if I go to my controller, this is the endpoint I am talking about. This is the name of the endpoint, add multiple. And then here it is API, and then controller basically means employees. So if I run my code now, and right now, if I send a GET request, I'm going to get 3 employees, as you can see here. But if I send this post request, I'm getting inserted rows 2. So 2 new rows were inserted. And if I get the employees one more time, these are the 2 new employees that I added using this endpoint. So this is the way to implement a command which returns, like something, like an integer in this case. So yeah, that's a wrap for this video. Thank you so much for watching this. And don't forget to stay tuned for the upcoming episodes. Subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss out on any of my, new uploads. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next episode.